Good afternoon. I'm going to call to order the Nashville MTA Board Meeting and welcome everyone here today. Happy Thursday. Well, before we get into the meeting, there's a couple items that I'd like to report on. First, I know we were all looking forward to hearing from Mayor Cooper at today's meeting, but unfortunately, the mayor had an unavoidable conflict come up and can't make it today, and sends his regrets. So we hope to see him at the September meeting. So Mayor Cooper, we'll see you in September. In the meantime, we'll sort of go about our other parts of the agenda today. And second thing, speaking of our agenda, on Mr. Searcy's Operation and Finance Committee agenda, we would like to defer item MA 22027 at the request of staff. This is the recommendation to amend the capital investment plan and award construction contracts for the Ernest Rip Patton North Nashville Transit Center. We received a protest of the contract award in accordance with our procurement procedures this past Tuesday, and staff would like to have sufficient time to conduct a proper review of the protest. We do expect to resolve this issue in time for a September contract award. Okay, those are board members, any comments? Okay, so going forward, I'd like to do a roll call. Jessica Dolphin.
Present.
Walter Searcy.
I'm here.
I'm glad. Mary Griffin.
I'm here.
Awesome, everybody's here, and Janet Miller got called away, so she was not able to be here today. If I could have a motion for approval of the July 28th, 2022 MTA board minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, additions, deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I don't have any requests for public comments. However, at all at your desk, someone mailed in a public comment, and when you have time, if you could read that, and it will become part of the record as a public comment as well. And it's from Jeremiah Wooten. Okay? If you all can take an opportunity to read it. I think you all have it there. We can read it in time, and then will you add that to the minutes? Thanks. Are there any other public comments? Anyone else here for public comments? Hearing no one requesting a public comments, the public comments portion of our agenda is closed. Thank you very much. So on our new format of agenda, we have information only items, and it's the monthly financial report, the debt obligation notification, the monthly operating statistics, and the upcoming procurement project list. Does any one of you all want to remove any of those for independent discussion?
Not I.
Any comments? Seeing none, I thank the staff for their copious notes as it relates to placing them in the board book and giving us a chance to review them carefully, so thank you very much. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda items, and those consent items are the video security system contract award and also the operations enterprise software system, the system support warranty sole source contract. Do any of you like to have any of those items removed from the consent agenda for independent conversation? Hearing none, I would ask that we have a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
And Tyler, I moved to you. Did I get that part right? We're sort of new doing this. I was hoping, like, I went and studied how you do that language. Any comments? Any questions? With no conversation, no comments? All those in favor of approving the items of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries for approval of the consent agenda items. Operations and Finance. I'll turn this over to you, Mr. Searcy.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. First, we'll hear the quarterly route performance report from Ms. Freudberg.
Good afternoon. Today I'll be presenting the quarterly performance report for April through June 2022. Overall, we've seen ridership continue to grow. Last quarter, we were at about 67% of pre-pandemic numbers. This quarter, that went up to about 79%. And based on what we're seeing so far from July and August, we expect to see that continue to rise in next quarter's report. We'll just focus in on a couple topics of interest from this quarter's report. First is Route 55, Murfreesboro Pike. This route took the position of highest ridership route from Gallatin Road about a year ago. Ridership is now well above pre-pandemic numbers. As you can see on this chart, the blue is pre-COVID numbers and the red is the current ridership. Weekdays are up a little bit, Saturdays are up pretty substantially. Sunday ridership on Murfreesboro Road is now 147% of pre-pandemic numbers, which is pretty impressive. We're now operating more service hours on this route than we did pre-COVID. Service is more frequent, and we're actually still seeing some overcrowding problems at peak times. Just this week on Monday, actually, we had to add extra buses to the route so that we weren't leaving people in the morning on their way to work. We're also seeing periodic overcrowding problems at night and on the weekends, and we would anticipate that if the ridership continues to grow, we'll need to add more service than previously planned within the next probably 6 to 12 months. This is our highest ridership route. It also has the worst on-time performance of all of our frequent routes. And for any of you who have driven on Murfreesboro Road, I think you know why. Congestion is essentially back to pre-pandemic levels. And in fact, in some places, we're actually seeing slower speeds than we ever did pre-COVID, which is a little worrying. This map here is just an example of current travel speeds in the morning. I know it's a little hard to see, but the dark red is an average speed of under 6 miles per hour on a road where the speed limit's 45. There's a few initiatives underway to hopefully help stabilize travel speeds on Murfreesboro. NDOT is currently working on some signal retiming that should help at peak times. The transit signal priority is not currently operational due to some software glitches, but we are expecting that to be back up and running sometime within the next month or so. And then we've also retimed this route just to more accurately reflect current travel times. So those changes will be effective in October. But even with all of that, we really don't expect the on-time performance to improve much. The core problem here is that the roadway is just at capacity. And we're expecting to see travel times just continue to deteriorate until the point where we have some form of dedicated bus lanes or priority, where we can operate separate from general traffic. And again, in the next 6 months to a year, we anticipate having to add buses to this route just to maintain the current 10-minute service. We've seen ridership return to different routes at different rates. We're also seeing it return at different rates at different times of day and days of the week than it was pre-COVID. Rob, thanks. This graph shows our weekday ridership by hour of day. So the spike on the left is the 7 a.m. hour. The spike on the right is the 3 p.m. hour. You can see here that we do have, again, defined peaks now, which is something that we really didn't see at the height of COVID. We were pretty much even all day, but it's nowhere near the level of peak ridership that we had pre-COVID. And we think this is, in part due to people working alternate schedules, more work from home and remote work. We've also seen our MNPS student ridership return at a somewhat slower rate than the rest of our general ridership. And we've seen nights and weekends have been really the fastest to return. Those are both essentially back at pre-COVID levels. It's been a year now since we added an extra hour of service Monday through Saturday on our 9 busiest routes. When this ridership started, we had about 70 passengers on the average day riding after 11:20 p.m. And we've seen that steadily increase over the past year. We're now averaging right around 200 passengers per day on that late night service. And Felix will touch on this, but we are planning to add an additional hour of service in the spring as well on those same 9 busiest corridors. And lastly,
That'll take us to what hour?
1:15 a.m. will be the last bus leaving downtown. And lastly, I wanted to touch on the on-time performance of the connector network here. You'll see that the connector network has the worst on-time performance of our 3 service classes, which is a little surprising considering that these routes have generally very low numbers of passengers and they don't touch the downtown core. Route 79 Skyline is a new route that we added this past April. And, you know, we take a couple different approaches to try to schedule a new route, but the reality is we mistimed this one. It just doesn't have enough running time. So Felix will be touching on this, but we're proposing some changes to the routing as well as the timing of it to try to get that on-time performance a little bit closer to where we would want to see it effective again in October.
Currently includes the hospital, 79.
Yes.
Includes a stop at the hospital.
Yes, so it currently stops at the hospital twice, once in each direction, and the proposal will be to only serve it one time, which, based on the ridership we're seeing, should help get most people still where they're going. And then the 75 Midtown is previously the Route 25 Midtown, is a route that's always had issues with construction through the Midtown area, as well as passing through several school zones. We've also identified some operational issues, and we're hoping that by tackling those in combination with retiming it, that we'll see those numbers go up a little bit in not next quarter's report, but the one after that. And that concludes my report, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
What were the operational issues that you referenced?
We've seen some cases where drivers had too much time to get from one time point to the next. So instead of leaving and then waiting at intermediate time points, they would be essentially just waiting until they were 10 minutes late so that they wouldn't have to stop anywhere along the route. So we've tightened those times up, and then we'll also be monitoring to make sure that people are leaving at those scheduled times.
And what's going on with Madison and the negative 13.70%?
So the 79 and 76 are interlined. They operate on the same bus going back and forth between the 76 and 79. So the 79 is currently dragging the 76's on-time performance down. So we expect that to go back up with the 79 when we fix that.
Thank you for that.
Is it just traffic on the connectors as well?
Sorry?
Is it just traffic and?
There is some traffic really on the 75 and 77, we see some traffic, and then a little bit on the Gallatin Road portion of the 76. The 79 doesn't really encounter too much traffic.
The only other thing I'd highlight off Katie's report with respect to Murfreesboro Pike is that is targeted for a major corridor study that hopefully does lead toward Murfreesboro Pike, full-blown BRT, which is kind of connected to a lot of the other engagements we've got on some transit upgrades.
Any
I
other
would just,
questions?
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, and I would just add, because we did receive one comment today that it is in favor of, and it says build the Murfreesboro Pike BRT on Route 55. So I would add that in, as that was the comment that was made and they were not in person.
Yes. Questions? Okay. Madam Chairperson, any questions?
None for me, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Katie. Okay, the MOU is next on our agenda. Trey?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. As Steve has mentioned a couple times in his recent CO reports, we've been working collaboratively with the team at the fairgrounds in advancing some stop improvements located along our Route 52 Nolensville Pike corridor at the fairgrounds. This is generally in the area of Wingrove Avenue intersection. In general, as we had our stop improvement project along the Nolensville corridor a few years back, we had included in the budgeting for that effort to improve stops at the fairgrounds. But as we got into kind of preliminary design, At that time, things were still being planned for improvements at the fairgrounds. So we decided to hold our designs there. We reserved about $1.3 million for advancing these stop improvements at this intersection as things at the fairgrounds developed. And since that time, a lot has happened on site. So we've had the completion of the Expo Center, the initial phase of Fair Park, which essentially is the dog park area around Craig Head and Bransford, the soccer stadium, Geodis Park's construction, the internal circulation and infrastructure improvements on site are getting really close to being completed. It should be completed in about the next month or so. So that's internal roadway network to connect all the areas of the site. And then that last kind of piece, and then also mixed use development has broken ground the last couple months. And we've been in conversations with the development team for the site as a whole. That last piece is the pedestrian connectivity across the whole site. And that's throughout a project and an effort and a phasing in their project. It's called Fair Park Phase 2. Essentially, that provides a pedestrian connection from all the areas of interest. So you got this huge site of property from Bransford all the way to Nolensville Pike. It provides that pedestrian connection. And we knew that whatever we tie to on Nolensville Pike is sort of, it's where our most frequent service is, but it's also not necessarily the front door of the fairgrounds. We want to make sure we can key into that pedestrian network and provide those multimodal connections for people accessing the site from our service. So with cooperation and some assistance from the fairgrounds, Laura Womack and her team at the fairgrounds, their development team led by Ron Gobble with Gobble Hayes, and then Margaret helping us draft an agreement. What we have before you today is a MOU for the board to consider. The agreement itself is pretty straightforward. If we could flip to the next slide, please. So essentially, for the fairgrounds cooperation and allowing us to utilize about 2,200 square feet of their property, which is the red area shown in the image, we were able to design, construct, and maintain an outbound transit stop at Nolensville Pike and Wingrove Avenue. And in the area on the screen, the dark shaded area is that pedestrian connection network. And you can see that our the stop pad for our bus stop will connect in 2 locations directly to that. So you'll be able to board, alight the bus, and key directly into that improved pedestrian network. So Wego will design, construct, and maintain that improved transit stop. And the agreement that's before you today was considered and approved by the Fair Board at their August meeting earlier this month. Next steps overall for the project and our development of these 2 transit stops. For the outbound stop, we look to finalize the design and send our plans on to NDOT and Metro Water Services for their concurrence with those plans. For the inbound stop across the street across Nolensville Pike, not part of this agreement, but just to bring the board up to speed on that, we look to advance a design that keeps us within the right of way and also work on concepts to provide a pedestrian connection across Nolensville Pike. Right now it's about 5 lanes. There is a striped crosswalk, but it's pretty difficult to navigate. So some sort of signalized crosswalk incorporated into our inbound station design for that. And all told, for the outbound station and hopefully for the inbound station, we hope to be operational for the 2023 MLS season. With that, we recommend the board approve the proposed MOU with the Fairgrounds Nashville.
Is that also accessible by bikes, scooters?
It's envisioned as a multi-use path, so it's 10 feet wide, and it will actually connect. So this is at the intersection corner you see here is Nolensville and Wingrove. This will actually go cross Browns Creek, so into the side a little bit, cross Browns Creek, and then parallel Craighead all the way to the recreational soccer fields and greenway network that's over on that part of the site as well. So we've got the roadway network that it connects to that kind of crisscross the site, and then this pedestrian path will follow kind of the periphery of the site as well. And NDOT's working for sidewalk improvements along Craighead, so really improving the pedestrian environment in the area of the site.
The orientation of the map is
North is to the left of the image.
due left or?
Page left is north.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So inbound left, outbound right for our service.
queries? Ladies?
It's interesting. I mean, it would give great access. That's okay.
All right. Well, we've heard Trey's recommendation, and I'm inclined for our committee to pass this to the board.
Just briefly, Trey, I would like to amend your recommendation in that you recommended that the board have the authority and we do not. So if I might, if you could restate your recommendation,
Of course.
please.
So staff recommends that the board provide the CEO the authority to enter into the proposed memorandum of understanding with the Fairgrounds Nashville for the improved transit stop.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah. With that correction, the Operations and Finance Committee recommends it to the board.
So it's the recommendation of the Finance Committee, I'm sorry, we have a recommendation from your committee, and since we have a recommendation, that does not require a second, so all those in favor? Well, before I ask for the vote, any more discussion? Hearing no more discussion, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Good catch, Mary. Good job.
Thank you much. Now, the capital improvement plan, there's an amendment presented to us. Trey, you want to walk us through that?
That's the one we've asked to defer, Mr. Chair.
That's the one what?
On the Rip Patton. North National
That's the one we
Transit
deferred.
Right.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
So we're on the on-call capital program.
Thank you very
support
much.
services. However, that is Trey as well.
Still here.
Still here, still here. We even tried to get rid of one, so
Popular
still
fella
here.
interrupting my candy consumption. Please.
All righty. Well, thanks again. We utilize engineering, architecture, construction management, and planning professional services to augment our in-house staff and really to be a force multiplier for being able to deliver projects underneath our capital improvement plan. We also utilize this staff assistance for our maintenance of our facilities, analyze scenarios for service improvements, help us provide analyses for certain grant applications, and then ultimately to address our agency's asset management plan as well. Previously, we had some on-call program management services contracts that were awarded in 2017 to firms CDM Smith and HDR. Those contracts, after the execution of their original 3-year term and 1-year amendment, 1-year extensions to each contract, expired in June of this year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner in procurement, Denise Richardson, to review the solicitation.
Hi, good afternoon. So we employed a different strategy for this procurement than we had used for the program management contracts, in that we broke the scope of services up into categories to enable smaller specialty firms to propose as a prime contractor instead of being relegated to what had traditionally been a subcontractor role. And the strategy was successful. We received prime contracts from Kingdom Development Group, who was also participating for construction administration on the North Nashville Transit Center, and also from Fairpoint Planning for transportation planning. We received six proposals overall. We interviewed all 6 firms. We selected 5 firms to submit cost proposals as a qualifications-based procurement. First, we evaluate the teams, then we ask for cost proposals. We negotiated those cost proposals and came up with suitable cost proposals that were determined fair and reasonable for each of the proposers based on their overhead rates, their fees, and other factors. And then as a task order-based contract, we have set the contracts up so that within the frame of each contract, we can ask for multiple proposals for a particular task order based engagement so that we are not bound to any one of the firms for any assignment, which will enable us both to increase DBU participation through an individual task order and also to make sure that we're getting the best combination of scope approach, schedule, and mix of personnel. So it gives us a great deal of flexibility within each proposal to make sure that we're getting the best response for each assignment. Anytime that we have a task order that will be over $300,000 in value, we will present it to the board for prior authorization. The overall DBE contract participation goal is 14%. However, as I mentioned earlier, we will be setting individual goals as a task permits to increase DBE participation wherever possible. So with that, I'll turn it back to Trey for the recommendation.
Just wanted to real briefly highlight something notable about each of the firms that we're recommending today. As Denise mentioned, one of our goals in this solicitation was to maintain flexibility and just have some synergy with some efforts that are taking place both in town and in the region. And we really did get that in these proposals. For instance, Fairpoint Planning, we've been working with them even this week as they're one of the partners on the Connect Downtown project. And so it's been they're very familiar with the effort that's going on with that and recommendations that will be coming from that in the future. CDM Smith and their subconsultant LDA Engineering currently have a major role with NDOT and the Bikeways and Sidewalks program in Nashville, and a lot of our bus stop improvements in general within right-of-way infrastructure improvements that we're making look very similarly technically to what's being done in the sidewalk and bikeway program. Denise mentioned Kingdom Development Group, but also Wendell are both in separate capacities assisting us with the Rip Patton North Nashville Transit Center, and also independently have experience with other transit facility projects, as well as other transit projects and familiarity with FTA and regulations on that, as well as some expertise on the construction management side under Kingdom Development Group's proposal. And then lastly, HDR has provided expertise to us on maintaining the Wego Star corridor over the life of the contract, done a very good job as far as maintaining the say good repair on that and overseeing work over the last several years. And they've also helped us on the Nestor study. So all these firms are very kind of familiar with the work that we do and have the capabilities to execute. So with that, staff requests for the board to provide the CEO the authority to enter into on-call capital support services agreement with each of these firms according to the schedule outlined in the board packet, originally for a 3-year term with 2 1-year extension offers on those contracts, options on those contracts.
All right, questions?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
I just want to applaud you for really looking at the flexibility and strategy with the partnerships and what you've done with restructuring this process. So thanks for that.
Ditto. All right. So what do you want us to do?
We request approval.
Well, that request falls on the chairman's favorable ears, and as such, we'll recommend to the board that we approve it.
Great, thank you. We have a recommendation from the committee. Is there any, not needing a second, any further discussion? Hearing no discussion, I would echo the sentiments of everyone else that this is like a really nice new process to be able to take care of things, so well done. With that being said, any further discussion? Hearing none, calling for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Yeah.
Great. All right. Our favorite topic is about to be presented by our CFO, pension overview. Let's hear it. Let's have it.
All right, thank you, sir. On pages 34 through 39 of the packet, this discussion item is being presented to the board to give the members an idea of what it means to be the guarantor of the pension plan and why it came about. Hopefully, members have had a chance to read the item, which goes into quite a bit of detail on the history that I will briefly summarize and then move into some slides that will give the better context as to the dollars we're dealing with in the guarantee. Ultimately, there is a draft agreement put together by Margaret and the pension attorneys that is included with this discussion item that highlights, defines, and outlines what responsibilities the MTA board has as a guarantor and the process needed to give the CEO signature authority as the guarantor to sign any amendments that might come up from time to time. This agreement will be brought back before the board at a future date for consideration of approval. Next slide. The guarantee was adopted by the board in 1997 at a time that it became apparent that the utilization of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, or PBGC, as the guarantor of the plan was going to be a challenge for the future of the plan due to the expensive premiums that were charged by PBGC. The plan had previously had an IRS determination that it was considered a governmental plan. PBGC did not agree with this because they didn't have jurisdiction over governmental plans. So after 20 years of fighting about it back and forth in the courts, PBGC finally did agree to the IRS ruling and with the stipulation that the MTA be the guarantor. Just for, and that too. For context, the PBG fees or premiums would be in excess of $500,000 a year to be the guarantor of the plan. But basically, what does this mean? It basically means the fund is, or the pension plan is self-funded with MTA being the guarantor. So if PBG had still been in place, if for whatever reason the plan terminated, it would be PBGC's responsibility. But in this case, based on this vote of the board in 97, it's the MTA's responsibility. It's important to note, though, that the guarantee only comes into play if the plan is terminated. Reasons for termination could be the employee's vote to no longer support the plan, which I kind of doubt that would happen, or if it's just financially unable to support the pension liabilities being paid out to the retirees. The plan is very dependent upon market performance, as you can imagine, for its annual returns and also just for the value of the assets that are needed to fulfill the liabilities of the pension. An actuarial study or evaluation is done every year as well as an audit to determine what the employer and employee contributions need to be to keep the plan stable, and then from an audit standpoint, just to talk about the financial stability of the plan. The trustee's been Regions Bank for well over 40 years. It is important to note the pension committee did go back out to bid 2 years ago, had 3 bids, and actually re-awarded it to Regions. So we're in that shape there. And again, as far as I stated before the beginning, this agreement is basically just to highlight or outline what the board's responsibilities are. Next slide. I just wanted to give you an idea. This next slide talks about the plan's rules for employees to participate. The full-time employees are required to begin participation after 90 days of employment with a 4.5% contribution of their pay going to the plan. The vesting is 7 years, which is a little unusual, but it was what was negotiated with the union at the time, way before all of us, when the plan was originally set up. The DTO as a member must contribute whatever else is calculated by the actuaries that's over that 4.5% that the employees contribute. And just for context again, DTO basically contributes about $3 million to the plan a year, and the employees are about $1.7 million. I do have a slide coming up that will kind of break that out a little bit better for you to see. Employees can retire based on 2 conditions. They could either be a combined age and years of service of 84 points or reach the age of 65 with at least 7 years of service. The plan does allow for early retirements and also disability. Early retirements can be after 7 years, starting at age 55, but the benefit is reduced by 50%, and then it's graduated up to age 64, where it comes up to about 93%. Disability retirements are at 100%, but it does require medical letters from 2 independent doctors stating why the employee is no longer able to work, and then the pension would be allowed to award a disability pension. Also, for retirees that are under disability, they're required to recertify annually if they're still under 65, to recertify annually by submitting a doctor's note, basically, that they are still disabled. Next slide, please. Now we get to talk about the financial health. The audit was done for June 30th, 2021 by Crossland in their first year as the auditors for the pension plan. As you know, they are our auditors as well for MTA. And Buck Actuaries did the actuarial evaluation. The plan received a clean opinion with no findings or significant deficiencies. At the time, at June 30 of 2021, the assets were at 68.4 million with liabilities of 72.6, which basically means the plan was 92.4% funded, with unfunded liabilities of about $4.2 million. Now, I'm going to quickly take you through some slides that will give you the context, but before I do, I thought it was really important to state the fact that the plan is actually managed, when I say managed, the investments are managed by Regions Wealth Management Division. The committee is just in for oversight that meet quarterly with the bank to understand exactly what happened for the previous quarter. It is controlled by an investment plan that basically gives limits to them. As far as for equities, it can never be any more than 70% of the plan. As far as fixed income, it can't be any more than 30%, those kinds of things. Very, very traditional type investment schedule. So if we'll go on to, and one other thing too, the pension committee is made up of 2 union members as well as 2 DTO members, me being one of them, as well as the chief administrative officer, but she ditched us, so we're going to have a replacement, and we will have that soon, and they will join me on the pension committee. Okay, next slide. The next slide, this is basically who is a participant in the plan. As you can see, I'll concentrate on the far left of 2021. That's basically, we have 925 individuals that are participants, made up of the 255 retirees and 640 actives. And then you see the little orange thing in the middle there, the 30, that's a deferred pension. That's a little unusual for it to be that high. You can see over the past 3 years, it's actually grown. And I hate to say it, but it's a COVID consequence. When people leave the company, they're required to turn in paperwork, obviously, to request their refund. And people have just been slow. We've been making great strides this past year in trying to find those individuals and get them to get their paperwork in. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide. This is basically to give you an idea of the performance of the plan. I did it over a 20-year period. You can see back in 2001, it was at 18.5 million, and we're currently at the end of June of 22 at 61.4 million, just off of the 68.4 that we had at the end of last year. Again, due to market performance, which I'll highlight here in just a second. Next slide. This is one of the key performance indicators for pension plans. It's i.e. how much is funded. And again, I did the 20 years again to show you that yes, actually in 2001, it was an overfunded plan. But with the ebbs and wanes of the market and the sensitivity to that, you can see the different percentages working its way back up to the 94.2 last year. And then that last item, that last column is not a true number. What I did just to give the board an idea of the sensitivity to the market, I took the liability from 21 and applied the asset values in 22, and you can see that it basically came down 9 points due to the market, the actual value of the plan being down to 61 million. So I just think it's important for you to understand how that sensitivity. Next slide, please. Now, this is actually the dark orange is basically the slide you just saw. That's the percentage funded. And now we're talking about the unfunded liability portion, which is the light orange. And you can see it's ebbed and waned through the years and got it down to as low as 4.2 million this past year. And again, due to my example, I wanted to show it's about 11.2. So what does that mean? Basically, this guarantor of the plan, MTA, if the plan were to terminate, MTA would be on the hook for $11.2 million at that time. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, it's a pretty healthy plan, but I think it's important for the board to understand what the guarantee means. So that's why I wanted to highlight that. Next slide. This is the breakdown that I promised a minute ago. This is basically how the contributions have been broken out as a percentage of payroll. You can see the 4.5% is a solid line for the employees as their contribution. And then as the actuary calculates, you can see it's gotten as high as almost 11% back in 2013. And then in 2018, it started to, as the plan got more mature, we were able to set a set rate for the contribution. Number one, in other words, we're overfunding the plan based on what the actuary says we need to do. Two things for that. Obviously, it helps the plan in terms of its performance, but selfishly, it's so that I can put 8% in the budget of payroll every year that I present to you, and I know that we have a good number to work with. So it's just, I think it's helping the plan considerably. Next slide, please. This is the last slide that I have for you. I thought it was really important to show this. The actuarial calculations of the contributions is in the blue. And as you can, and the orange is the actual retiree payments. And you can see that all the way up until 2022, the contributions themselves are actually outpacing what's required as far as the liability being paid out year to year, which two things, it helps the plan obviously in terms of building principal. You're not taking away principal to be able to pay the retirees. And in 2022, I think it really is actually still outperforming. But as you recall, the 30 deferred, we've been making catch-ups, so there's a little bit of a spike in the payouts in the benefits for 2022. So I just thought that was important in terms of the stability of the plan, that you know that the contributions are still being greater than what is actually required to be paid out. So basically, in conclusion, you can go to the next slide. And basically, in conclusion, we wanted the board to understand that there is no fiduciary or oversight responsibility as the guarantor. The board's role is to be aware of the existence of the plan and that MTA is the guarantor of the plan should it be terminated. As guarantor, the board should be updated, just like we just did for the financial stability of the plan, at least annually, or if there's some great event change, the board should be made aware of that. If there are amendments that come from the plan, the board should be made aware of them and asked to approve as its role as a guarantor. And then ultimately the role of the CEO is to follow the board's lead to sign that as the guarantor, whatever amendment it might be. It could be administrative, it could be whatever. There's only two that I will bring at a future date, and they're all administrative. But again, we just thought as the guarantor, they should know what's going on with the plan and the risks that are involved. And unless there's any questions, that concludes my report.
All right. Yes.
Is there any, and I don't know, is there ever a plan for our risk to be reduced in terms of and being a guarantor, like less than the 11 million you talked about? Is there a time when
like it was 4.2, it just depends on at the point in time when the plan terminates. The actuaries would have to come back in to see what the actual liability would be, because there's rules that kick in as far as active employees that aren't fully vested, they would actually just get a refund of their money. So in some cases, the actual liability upon termination could be less than what we see here. I'm not an actuary, so I'm not going to attest to that. I've just been told that by the actuaries, but it just depends. So
it doesn't fluctuate with market or anything?
Well, no, the unfunded liability will definitely fluctuate with the market. The lower the market goes, the more the liability would be.
And the better the market is?
And the better the market, we would love to be over 100% funded and nobody would have to worry about anything.
In theory, and and to Ed's point, the chances of the fund ceasing to exist are pretty slim. It's a healthy fund, and and frankly, from an employee perspective, defined benefit pensions are hard to come by anymore. Mm-hmm. So really, the primary risk is market performance. Right. Theoretically, if it were to terminate and the market were doing really well, you might get cash back. But more than likely, it would be cash that would have to be put in. And the way to mitigate risk is kind of what the board had to deal with in 1997, which you're weighing that, is it worth it to pay those premiums, which, at this point probably would have totaled $15 million cumulatively, $15 to $20 million, to know that if it did terminate, it's not your problem. So, and I appreciate Ed putting this together, and I know he worked closely with Margaret on it. I also want to thank Mary, because she knows more about this probably than all of us in this room combined. In taking a look. From my perspective, it was I can remember one of the first days I started here, Ed brought something, can you sign this? And I looked at it and I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm going to sign it. So that's really where we kind of started the pattern of just making you aware. We're not raising it as this is a problem, but it's definitely it's something that's essentially embedded in our financial statements when you see the audits. So I do think it's important that you just get a periodic update. and a reminder, because I'm pretty sure, Gail, even you weren't on the board in 1990.
Yeah, I was gonna let the record reflect that, and I was not here in 1997, even though I have a storied history here. I wasn't here for this. Neither was Ed.
Mary, I'm going to lean on your expertise and ask, are there any ERISA flags that we need to be concerned about in this particular fund?
I think they've got that under control. I think it's, you know, for me to read through, I think you need to, when you've got something at this level of investment, et cetera, you know, there's got to be more review. And again, you trust the experts, you know, there's outside counsel, there's Ann Margaret, and so you've got in-house counsel and outside counsel, and, you know, you rely on that expertise, because even if you're a pension attorney, you know, you still rely on the ERISA experts, you know, on the ERISA issues. But it does make sense to me that we get an update. I would like to remind the board, I sort of requested an overall pension overview at some point, and this was my reward. So when,
Thank you.
Beware. And I appreciate it. And I may be the only one who does not say, oh, snooze. This impacts something that I think we've seen nationally. We are a unicorn now of a business that still offers a defined benefit retirement. That's something most people don't even appreciate until you're too old to have gotten it, right? And I think it is especially important now, just in case that social media career doesn't take off, you know, just in case.
Just in case.
There's going to be some of us, you know, I feel really old now, because now I am like my dad saying, you know, put away for retirement, and it's quite a mantra. But that's what I think we're doing here today, is saying you're not going to be the teachers of Missouri who literally worked their whole lives, because we have really, you know, hardworking on the ground employees, you know, bus drivers and a lot of folks that are not in the room. And what happened in Missouri at one point was all the teachers pretty much discovered that they didn't have a pension. And we've seen it happen in Chicago, and we've seen it happen in many, many states and cities, you know, at localities a lot. And so I think, you know, we are not, I'm going to say it again, we are not fiscally, you know, we're not doing due diligence here of the plan, et cetera, at all. But we're saying, we're paying attention, you know, we're paying attention, and we want to be aware, and we want to support, as we do in this board, right? And we want to support the workers by saying, you know, we're paying attention to what's going on, and if we did see something that was a flag, we would bring it up and, you know, ask. Does that sound more than answering your ERISA question, because I'm not your lawyer, so.
And I think it's reflected in some of the other decisions the board's made historically. I mean, it goes back to, we've been sort of leveling it at 8% annual contributions, even though we didn't have to contribute that much. Yeah, it gives us some budget stability, but it also, you know, where the fund is at 94% with the recent decline in market performance, it would have been significantly lower than that without making those additional contributions. So, you know, those are the kind of financial planning decisions that are really important. And actually, the whole issue was kind of born out of ERISA, because ERISA created the pension benefit guarantee, which kind of put the authority in the bind of paying for those premiums, and that's how the whole case history with the governmental plan came to pass.
As I said, this was a discussion item only. I'll bring back the agreement for consideration, maybe possibly next month. And there are two small, we can test the waters. There are two small amendments, again, very administrative in nature, that I would like to go ahead and have Steve be able to sign those as well.
And Margaret plans to read the agreement line by line when she's back, so.
Good for her.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ed.
Well done, thank you.
Okay. Wego Central and Nestor Yard Management and enhanced vehicle tracking. Dan?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon.
Dan the man.
Now, I might find this a little bit more exciting than pension obligations, but hopefully you do as well.
This is the presentation where Ed goes to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to start with a brief overview, and I do have a PowerPoint to go along with this. This is a board action item starting in your packet on page 40. There's more detail in there, but I did want to talk about why we are looking at doing this particular project and how it fits into some of our broader service improvement, reliability improvement initiatives. So as a brief background, we do have vehicle tracking on all of our buses and paratransit vehicles. And it's GPS based, so it uses the same technology that you would have in your car or in your cell phone. But GPS has certain limitations. It doesn't work really well indoors, underground, and it also can't pinpoint your location to within just a foot or two in most cases. And so those limitations have a real impact in terms of our ability to track our vehicles, and specifically to track them in real time at two of our most important facilities, Wego Central and also our Nestor garage, where currently all of our vehicles operate out of. So just as an example of the impact of this on our day-to-day operations, this is a view of what a supervisor would see managing our system in our current vehicle location system. And it's difficult from this view for a supervisor to know exactly where the vehicles are within the facility at Central, and also exactly when vehicles have arrived and departed from the facility. We do have a system, and there's a screenshot of that shown on the right in this slide, that allows us to identify when buses are physically occupying a particular bus bay, but the equipment that powers that system is end of life, it's no longer supported, we can't get replacement parts. And that system is also limited in that it'll tell you when a bus is in the bay, but it can't track the vehicles that moves through the facility. As an example of what a supervisor sees at Nestor, you can see it's just a big pile of buses with one of them showing up apparently in the river, although I can assure you that it wasn't. This is just, it wasn't 2010, I promise. But this is an example of GPS bounce where vehicles can show up a few hundred feet away from where they actually are. So that particular vehicle is probably located inside the building at the time. And so you get those kinds of issues. I did want to note also that this, even if the GPS is working pretty well, it's impossible to know exactly where a vehicle is parked in this facility because the parking spaces are very dense. So right now we have someone who physically walks the yard, as we call it, on the Nestor property, mapping where each bus is parked in the facility. They do that at least 2 or 3 times a day, and then input that information into our dispatching system. So it's a highly labor-intensive process, and one that can lead to issues with the information becoming out of date very quickly when vehicles start to move around. And that brings us to a few of the impacts on service that a GPS limited system has. So first, I would say most important is the impact that it can have on customer information. Specifically at Central, if you have that GPS bounce issue, a vehicle can appear to have already left the facility when in fact it hasn't. And that is true for information that customers would be looking at on their smartphone applications, as well as our supervisors looking at those dispatch screens. And that can also impact predicted arrivals at future stops when people are trying to plan trips and see when the vehicles are going to arrive. And again, it's not because the system that we have at the moment is not working as intended, but it's just limitations of the technology that we currently have. At Nestor, of course, this can impact garage pullouts in terms of operators knowing where their vehicle is, as well as our supervisors knowing which vehicles have been flagged for example, for maintenance-related items. Those are currently tracked in 2 separate systems, so the ability to have that coordinated in one system on a map-based view is really important. And this also impacts our historical data that we use for service planning. And another important item, and we talked about this, it's been a little while, but there's a dispatching method or a method of service management called Headway Management, which is a little bit different than the way we manage service today. Right now, everything is based on a schedule. But when you have very frequent service, such as on Murfreesboro Pike, it makes more sense to operate the service where you're more concerned about the interval between buses as opposed to whether the bus left at a particular time. Because the customer experience is they want to make sure that a bus is coming every, say, 5 or 10 minutes. And so this really enables that by having, it's important to have really detailed departure information available to be able to manage something like that. So we've been working with Trapeze Group on a proposed solution that would enhance our existing vehicle tracking system using antennas that would be installed on the vehicles. And these antennas would be battery powered, so we wouldn't have to drill any additional holes in the vehicles, which I know makes Carl Brokus, our maintenance director, happy. But it's also, there's an advantage because the system works when the vehicles are off, which is important if you're trying to track where vehicles are at a garage where they're going to be off a lot of the time. So if a vehicle gets moved or towed or something like that, you'll still know where it is. And this equipment, if we move facilities in the future, we can repurpose this equipment, keep the same equipment on the vehicles. Here's an example this slide shows from a system that recently implemented the type of technology that we're looking at. This was from CODA in Columbus, Ohio. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but essentially all of the vehicles are color-coded based on their maintenance status. So whether they need to be held, for example, for preventive maintenance, or if they need to be fueled or serviced or something like that, as well as whether they're already scheduled to go out. And so you actually get a view of where the vehicles are in the facility in real time, updating every few seconds. It makes it a lot easier for everyone to know what's going on when you're trying to operate the service and make sure that vehicle pullouts happen on time. So there's a number of benefits for a system like this. Specifically at Central, the customer-facing impact in terms of improved vehicle locations and ETAs is very important. There's also the impact on overall service reliability by enabling us to engage in proactive service management techniques such as headway management. And this also supports data accuracy overall when we're looking at things like, for example, travel times and trying to make adjustments to our schedules to ensure that vehicles have enough running time between stops, but not too much that the vehicle is unnecessarily delayed. And then at Nestor, this eliminates that manual process of walking the yard and recording all the vehicle locations, and also helps significantly in a number of areas that will help to improve our on-time performance in leaving the garage, which of course is very important in delivering reliable service, because if you have a vehicle that starts out late in the day, first thing in the day, it's hard for that time to be able to be made up later. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I did want to highlight that this is an action item, so I'll just read through the staff recommendation briefly, and then can take any questions. So the staff are recommending the board of directors to approve a sole source procurement with Trapeze Group for the provision, installation, and configuration of yard management and enhanced vehicle tracking hardware for a fixed cost of $1,845,632. plus $124,368 in contingency and construction make-ready work for a project total of $2 million. And this is identified as a project in the FY 22-23 MTA capital spending plan. This is recommended to be a sole source procurement. There's details in the action item regarding why we felt that was justified, but we did take some time in making sure that we understood our options in making that decision. I'm happy to take any questions on that as well. Thank you.
Dan, this is not directly dealing with the trapeze issue, but is there technology available that would allow operators to receive information such that would direct them to the correct side of the street in picking up and dropping off patrons. And this is particularly the case in access.
Yes, on the paratransit side, and this is something we're looking at through our access improvement study, we're looking at other technologies aside from what we're using currently that may provide more granular driver instructions, especially in facilities where you have multiple entrances. There are opportunities to be able to direct drivers and customers to those locations, but it would not be directly addressed through this particular project.
Right. Jess, you had a question? Yeah, or comment?
More comments.
Okay.
Just want to say that this seems like a step in the right direction for an agency like Wego that needs to be more efficient with its inventory, movement, and maintenance. I loved seeing those screenshots. Thank you for that. Especially if we're looking to expand the fleet and frequent network. It's really a better utilization of resources like our software, our inventory, and our people too, like eliminating the manual walking of the yard and checking off, looking for buses that you need to pull into the garage, for instance. And you get to make progress on the capital spending plan to boot. So kudos on that. I was a little concerned, and you were kind of getting at it, but it seemed like the trapeze software wasn't really preferred, so you put it out that, and I'm trying to understand what you have in here in the narrative, but it turns out that no other software company could match what Trapeze could do.
So the Trapeze group provides a number of products for us. And what we refer to as CAD AVL, the vehicle tracking product, is one that's provided by, they actually did a recent breakout. They call them Vantas. It's basically a rebranding of that business unit. And actually, we have a number of products with them, but the vehicle tracking system is actually one that's worked quite well for us since implementing in 2015. And we've been reasonably happy. We certainly have technical issues from time to time, but that relationship is strong. And the language in here regarding the technical aspects of the decision to continue with them on this particular solution is that unless we were looking at replacing that entire platform, which we're not looking to do because we are satisfied with it, there would be significant risks in terms of integration that would have to be done with another provider's platform to make it work with ours. And as well as cost implications to have that integration done, whereas in continuing with this as an enhancement to our existing system, that integration is native to the solution.
Gail, you may recall this because I was dealing with it pretty shortly when I came here, but we had a prior supplier of the CAD AVL system that just didn't work. I mean, we were in litigation for several years, and and it delayed the project. I know when I came, pretty much every public presentation I went to, people would yell at me about when are we getting real-time information. So the trapeze system, for lack of a better word, and for that matter, Dan and Rob and the folks here who worked through it, kind of saved the day, so it has worked well. And the challenge with any of these is, when you pick a solution, you're kind of it's like getting married. I mean, it's a long-term relationship. Unless you're ready, to Dan's point, to cut the cord on this, you're either taking tremendous risk that somebody else can integrate with their stuff, or you're saying we're going to take those 8 or 10 applications that we use from them, we're going to throw them all out and start over with somebody new. So I know every time, you had one on the consent agenda for just our ongoing, maintenance agreement. And I know whenever I look at it, it's like, it's a long-term relationship. I hope it's still a relationship of mutual benefit. And I know I always talk to Trapeze's senior leadership and remind them of how grateful they should be and how responsive they should be. But that's sort of the best approach, least risk. This is a risk assessment day, least risk approach. And again, to Jessica's point, the focus is continuing to enhance our service effectiveness. And when you look at some of the information that Katie shared, dinner conversation at the Freudberg household must be really interesting. We're going to have to move in these directions to maintain any kind of efficiency on some of our network.
Thank you for that. I just want to say that today's been full of like intentional, strategic progress from staff, and it's been really great. Thanks.
So with those conversations with Trapeze, you feel comfortable that they understand the importance of our relationship with them?
They're going to be around for a while, number one. Number two, they do annual users meetings where they have, folks come in really from all over the world to share information and knowledge about their products. And Nashville's become a favorite destination. And typically when they're in Nashville, they'll ask me to do a keynote speech. So I always go to Dan a few days before the keynote speech and ask for what my message should be, and they know this. So I think they're scheduled to come in next year.
They're here next year, April, I believe.
So I will, and I'll see them in a few weeks. I'll remind them that, gee, wouldn't it be really great for us to show this off to all of your customers when you're in town next year?
Well, that's great, and I think Dan and Katie have certainly shown that they know how to negotiate and navigate a good, sound relationship. So I think their work with Trapeze.
You're talking about Trapeze, or?
That too. They've worked with Trapeze, and they seem to have that skill set pretty much well done, so. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, we've heard the recommendation, and the committee accepts the recommendation and moves to the board that we adopt the recommendation as proposed.
Well, there's a recommendation from the committee for adoption of the staff recommendation, and not requiring a second. Is there any further comments, any more conversation?
Just one more comment. As a former commuter rider, I thank you very much for the on time, leaving the garage. I do think this explains something that we spent so many days discussing as riders, where somebody would say, it's on its way. No, it's gone. Wait, it's back. No, it's gone. And they were looking at the app, and I always wondered, where did it go? And yeah, it's in the river. Yeah, people would say it was in weird spots. It's inside the bank, and you've just explained, what was going on there. I'll be sharing with some of my former commuter riders that it wasn't inside the bank. So thank you for that.
That's great.
Before I pass the gavel back to you, Madam Chairperson, let me add commendations to Ed in his earlier presentation on pensions, and most particularly the history. I loved it. It was great. 1945 forward. Appreciated that. Thank you.
And before I go back to Mary, I still have to do the call for the vote on
Yes.
Trapeze. So I'm gonna call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. We will now know exactly where the bus is. Not in the river,
So Mary, if you see one in the river, give me a call.
because that's really.
Well, I mean, I saw how that could happen when I walked the yard over there. Literally, they've got a spot where if you backed up just a little bit too much, into the river it goes in that back parking lot.
Yeah, we're looking at alternate revenue strategy. We're going to create a boat launch right there.
Mr. Searcy, that concludes your report? You're busy today. Thank you. Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you very much.
One other thing we're
Yes.
not talking about.
Yes,
We need to make certain that everyone looks at the procurement list.
yes.
Please do that. As we see many opportunities potentially for DBE vendors. That's it.
That's it.
all.
That's all?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Searcy, and Ms. Griffin, I will turn the Nice Committee over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Being that Walter has covered the whole agenda, there's one item left, and I'm positive that our Director of Planning, Felix Casrodad, will not disappoint with the fall service changes and the Title VI analysis. To you, Felix.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I know we can all be honest, this is your favorite topic right here. So not the pension. I know you were trying to make Ed feel good, but so I'm going to be presenting to you the proposed service changes for the fall 2022. And I'm going to give you a look ahead into what we're considering for the spring service changes as well. The detailed information about the changes is in your packet, so I'm just going to take you to through some slides with information and the summary of the proposal. So I'm going to start with the fall 2022 service changes. The majority of these changes are minor changes to the system. We have some route modifications that we're doing basically to improve the operations and the reliability. It's just, in some cases, just moving the route just one block over, just to make sure that it's on a street that maybe flows better and it's easier with traffic and so on. Katie mentioned Route 79 earlier. I think she gave the explanation of why we're doing that change in the routing. But basically, we're just going to serve the Skyline Hospital in one direction rather than the two directions, but we're still going to be serving the hospital. So that's a change there. We're doing some schedule adjustments to improve the reliability of the routes, minor changes to the schedules, some related to the modifications of the routing, and some just to better reflect what's actually the context of what's happening with traffic. At the lower bottom on the left, we are proposing to improve the service span for the access on demand. As you know, this is a premium service for access where you get to schedule a trip within 2 hours of that trip. The service currently ends at 6 p.m. on weekdays, so we're going to be expanding that until midnight. So that's more opportunities for riders to use that service. And the bulk of the fall changes have to do with the expansion of the Wego Link service. I'm going to go in more detail with those changes. So the expansion of the Wego Link service is an equity element of the Better Bus Plan, and it involves the mobility on demand. Basically, we provide first and last mile connections in areas where we currently don't have coverage with our fixed route network, opening the possibility for other people to access transit. And these are areas where it's challenging to provide a fixed route service. It is a partnership with Uber, where a rider within the zone can ride for $2 as long as the trip is $10 or under. And we also use mobility solutions which provide accessible vehicles, so it's open to anybody that may need an accessible vehicle as well within that zone. If you recall, when Dan and I presented on the proposed approach for expanding the program earlier this year, we talked about that we use census data to identify some areas of higher propensity for the use of service. So we looked at minority populations, low-income populations, households without cars, population and employment density, selecting those areas. So we had a lot many areas than what you're showing here, but we have to start somewhere with the expansion. So this is the phase one approach for expanding the system. Our goal is to expand to some other zones in the future, but this is what we're proposing based on some of that analysis. So we want to expand the zone in Antioch, and we also want to add 3 new zones, one in Hermitage, and Goodlettsville, and South Nashville. I'm gonna go a little bit more into the details of those. The first zone that you're seeing here is the Antioch zone. There's a dotted line that transects that zone. Basically, anything north of that is the current zone. So anything below that line is what we're proposing to expand. That is just gonna add some additional neighborhoods and apartment complexes that currently are not served by that zone. It also allows us to include a new transfer location that will be at the Southeast Community Center, or the Global Mall. In this, we'll provide connections to Route 55, Murfreesboro Pike, which is our highest ridership route, as you heard Katie talk about it earlier. We also have 2 additional transfer locations in that zone that will remain at Nashville Village and Bell Station. The next, we're proposing a new zone in South Nashville. This is gonna be adjacent immediately to the Antioch zone, to the west of I-24. And this will provide connections to Route 52, Nolensville Pike. So it's also a frequent route. There will be locations at Nolensville and Welshwood and Nolensville and Ocala. And we're also proposing to have that connection, transfer location at the Global Mall, Southeast Community Center, added to this zone. So anybody in this zone can ride the 52 or the 55 as well. The other zone that we're looking at is in Hermitage. In this case, any riders will have the opportunity to connect to the Route 6, Lebanon Pike, which is the bus route, or to the Wego Star commuter rail. There will be two zones for transfer, or two locations for transfers. Those will be the Hermitage and the Donaldson Station locations. And this is one zone that during the public involvement period, we kind of changed it a little bit to expand to connect to the Davidson-Wilson County line to add some additional neighborhoods. And we also took advantage of that to add the house of Andrew Jackson, the Hermitage, as an opportunity to add that also within the zone. And the last zone that we're looking to add is in Goodlettsville. This is outside of our service area, but an opportunity to connect to 4 different routes. There will be 3 transfer locations. The first one at Rivergate Mall, so they can connect to Route 56, Gallatin Pike. Madison Library, you can connect to 3 different routes there, Route 56, Route 76, Madison, or Route 79, Skyline. And the last one is at Dickerson Walmart, where any riders can connect there to Route 79, Skyline, or 23, Dickerson Pike. So in general, you see that we're giving an opportunity for people to have a lot more access to frequent service that they currently don't have. Our goal is to continue to expand this in the future, but this is a way to provide more resources within the resource, or more service within the resources that we have, and it's going to be hopefully a new opportunity for access transit in general.
Felix,
Yes, sir.
Before you go on, Mary, may I ask? Yeah. With the pressure that Wego Link is going to put on greater demand for access-oriented vehicles, in circumstance where they currently don't have enough vehicles to satisfy the demand, is there any way we're directly addressing that so that these people put more ambulances, for lack of a better description, in service?
Sure. No, for this service, we are not using our own vehicles.
I know. I know.
Walter, the backup, like Mobility Solutions, is used in case those trips come up. To date, have we had any?
Not so far, so it's been very low demand. Obviously, if we saw that expand over time, we would need to respond to that by using our resources or third parties, but.
Most folks in these, because access is a county-wide service.
Yeah.
So frankly, my guess is that most folks who might use that are already using access.
Already using access.
But it is one of the reasons that we're, I'll call it, doing slow rollouts of these zones, over time, as opposed to just saying, oh, this is manageable, let's put out 20 zones all over the county. The analysis that Felix's group did was to essentially prioritize based on a lot of those social equity considerations, as well as our ability to connect to halfway decent service in a safe location. I think when Dan and the group got into the actual implementation of the Antioch zone, one of the trickiest things is finding a good stop.
Sure. That's
a safe place for an Uber car to pick up and drop off, and that it's easy and accessible to get to that bus stop. So that's one of the issues, and it's one of the targets with our transit centers, is to make sure that we have that capacity.
Yeah, because my direct experience has been that you can order and access on demand and tell them that you need a wheelchair accessible vehicle. They schedule it, and then 10 minutes before they're to arrive, you get the response saying, we don't have one available. And so, but hearing you say that the probability is that our people are using access versus access on demand, then
Well,
that
are
makes
you,
sense.
are you talking about Wego Link or access on demand? The access on demand
well,
expansion?
Wego Link though is the first mile, last mile
Right.
will engage,
Yeah.
at least by conception, will engage hiring Uber, Lyft.
I think, I'm pretty sure all the trips we've done so far on access, or on Wego Link have been done by Uber, if I'm not.
That's correct. Yeah, so far. They are there in that situation where someone who needs that type of vehicle would be able to request it. We don't see a lot of demand for it yet. I think we would also, the hope would be at least that a customer in a wheelchair taking a trip on this program would be one that would have more than likely taken that trip on access. And so it would be replacing.
Well, let's keep our eyes on it.
Yeah. But the issue you're raising, Walter, is potentially there for the expansion of the access on demand hours.
Yeah, I did link them, but it appears that they could be decoupled, and we need to watch it over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you, Walter. That's a really important point to make, and I appreciate you bringing that. Dan, sorry.
Yeah.
Felix, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm just going to move into
There you go. There you go.
to the spring 2023
He's going to talk
service.
about the pension.
Yeah, I don't want to go back to the picture.
I'm not going to dwell a lot on these, but I'm just going to mention that looking into the spring 2023 service, we're going to continue. These are related to the expansion of, or continue to implement the Better Bus Plan. We're going to continue what we've been working on so far, which is the span of service, the frequency improvements in those routes. The frequent network, Katie mentioned, we're going to be extending the hours until 1:15 for weekdays and Saturdays. We're going to be extending also later service on 2 local routes, Lebanon Pike and the St. Cecilia Cumberland route. On the frequency, the Route 7 Hillsboro will see improvements, and this actually will move that route to officially be in the frequent network because of the having frequent service all day. And also Route 8 will see some improvements in the frequency. Lastly, we're going to be doing improvements to the crosstown routes. These routes are very important because they touch on a lot of different routes, so they provide connections to many other routes. So maintaining that reliability of it is going to be important. We're going to be adding frequency to the 75 Midtown and the 77 Thompson Wedgwood. And also we're going to be extending the hours of operations, including on weekends. And both of these routes will have Sunday service, which they currently don't have. So something to look for in the spring. Going out into this process, we had a public comment period from July 12th through August 2nd. We had 5 public meetings, one of them virtual, 4 of them in person, and of those 3, out of those 4 in person, 3 were in areas where we were proposing the expansion of the Wego Link program. We received about 53 comments or so during that process. We always get comments about everything when it comes to public meetings for MTA. That's good. We learn about other stuff. But pertaining to the process of the service changes, most of the comments were positive and feedback, especially about the Wego Link zones. We were actually able to help a couple of riders during the meetings to set up the voucher on their app so they can knew how to operate that. We had all the information on the website and social media channels. Everything was in Spanish and English and available to the public for their review. And then, of course, as with any system changes, we also do a equity analysis for Title VI, making sure that we are meeting the requirements of the program and making sure that everything that we're proposing is going to be equitable for those populations. We did not exceed the 20% threshold for minority or low-income populations. We always look at that. Any impact is considered negative if it impacts those populations 20% or more of those compared to non-minority or low-income populations. Plus, in looking at the proposed zones, we have a lot of census blocks that contain a lot minority and low income. So this would be an additional service that is currently not available for them to access transit. So overall, it's an improvement for that accessibility to transit. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have. But if not, the requested action is that the board approve the proposed service changes. These are for the fall 2022 changes. We will bring the spring 2023 at a later date. So the action today is to approve the fall 2022 proposed service changes to take effect on October 2nd, 2022.
Thank you, Felix. I mean, this is really exciting, the expansion into these particular neighborhoods. And I think, you know, it will also, beyond perhaps increasing, you know, the ridership even more and get some new riders, I think it can connect folks to some of the businesses, the small businesses, and, you know, minority and ethnic groups that have said for quite some time, particularly out Murfreesboro, Pike, you know, how do people get to us? And there's not parking in some of these small, you know, strip malls. And these are small family-owned restaurants. And, you know, my hope would be that this would also help, you know, benefit those communities economically. So I thank you for that and for the recommendation. Back to you, Madam Chair, unless anybody have anything?
So it's the recommendation of the committee to adopt.
Correct.
The fall changes.
The fall, yep, to take effect October 2nd. Thank you.
So there being a recommendation not requiring a second, is there any further discussion?
I just want to say that I'm not surprised that you had some positive comments because you're adding service, adding frequent service, expanding span and service times, a far cry from 2019 service realignments that Gail presided over. So this is a very exciting moment for some of us.
Here we are. It is exciting.
Enjoy the moment. Okay, moment's over.
Yeah, it's always exciting when we can expand service because that's who we are and who we want to be all the time. And it comes from a lot of support and a lot of hard work from a lot of people. So it's exciting. I agree. The other one wasn't.
Oh, it's excited, all right.
Yeah. So, any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Fall changes. And we'll know where the buses will be located as well. All this synergy today, this is good.
It's a new ferry.
Mary? You're joking. Anything further for your nice committee?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next, I'll go to you, Steve, for the CEO report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have a few items to report. Appreciate everyone's engagement in this meeting. I think everyone's aware we did participate this past week with Mayor Cooper, Metro Planning, and a number of council members and other Metro departments in the public release of the East Bank, Imagine East Bank Vision Plan. It's obviously receiving a great deal of attention, and it's currently receiving public comment. If the plan is to be realized, there are several projects that would have significant MTA involvement, and the major ones are the contemplation of full-blown dedicated lane BRT on a spine corridor on the East Bank, the development of an additional transit center on the East Bank, and longer term, if there's another Cumberland River crossing south of the downtown core, it could very well impact on the Nestor operations facility. So super important that we're engaged in that process. Really appreciate Lucy Kemp, Metro Planning, for bringing us in early, being engaged at a whole bunch of levels. It's going to be a super important topic as it evolves. So I know when it came out, Chair Williams and I had a conversation about doing a specific board workshop with Metro Planning on it. So we are trying to schedule that now, and would look forward to your engagement. We will likely try to do it as a special meeting because Planning Commission meetings conflict with this board time. So it would be tough for us to get the right folks there. So we're likely to coordinate on schedules for a different time. With respect to North Nashville, I appreciate the board's deferral of this item in response to the protests we received, it's an administrative item, it's pretty typical. As I said to folks, I love the fact that everybody wants to work with us now. You know, in contrast with not getting any bids or only getting one bid, having two contractors who really want to do this project, I think is a positive sign. We just got it last minute, and we knew with Margaret being away, we just want to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but don't really expect it to have a significant delay on the project. I know that Trey and the design team are working through some permitting issues and some other things that can keep progress moving, but we do expect to be back to you within a month on that. We're also pleased to be invited to join with Mayor Cooper, Councilmember Freddie O'Connell, on the dedication of a new recreational facility that was completed by Metro Water Services as part of their wastewater treatment plant upgrades up in the Salem Town neighborhood. And I think it really is a testament to, and I give special credit to folks like Trey and Lydia and Kia, who are really building relationships with outside departments. When Renuka and Eric asked me to show up for this ribbon cutting, I'm like, what the heck is this? I didn't know we were working on that project. But it's actually a Metro Water project where they collaborated with Metro Parks to create this beautiful little recreation space with an embedded, beautiful bus shelter and safer pedestrian crossing. Probably some influence in the fact that during the remarks, Councilman O'Connell remarked that it was the bus stop he used many years ago when he was just getting started in Nashville, and he remembered crawling through the mud and standing in the ditch to get on the bus. So if you ever have the opportunity, it's on our Metro Center route. It's really pretty cool. I was tempted to walk on some of the stuff, but I'm like, no, there's too many people here who can see something that I might not want them to see. Also continuing the theme of collaborations, very appreciative of NDOT inviting us to participate. They're in the process of identifying a new operator of the city's bike share program. And they've invited a number of organizations, including ours, to participate in that process. So hopefully to get better integration, you know, of bike share as in a multimodal transportation system. So for instance, the ability to, you know, maybe look at, can we integrate the bike share payment system with our quick ticket system? Can we make sure we have bike share stations located at our transit centers and our major stops? So Felix's group, Justin Cole, are going to be working on that. Really appreciative of Katie's presentation. I know when she was sharing the information with me, the board really needs to hear this because it's, you know, every month Andy reports and you see the numbers on the statistics, but you know, it looks relatively smooth on the surface. There's a lot going on underneath. And one of the things I know as I talk to my peers around the country and consultants and you name it, one of the things I'm struck by, and I really have to give kudos to pretty much everybody in this room, but particularly our planning and operations groups. Through the pandemic, we were very aggressive about reassigning services and realigning services to, you know, to kind of deal with what we were seeing in changing demand. So as a result, you know, when Katie reports we're up in the 82% of pre-pandemic ridership, that's one of the fastest returns in the country. Most of my peers are still reporting they're in the 50 to 60% range. So there might be a lot of reasons for that, but I think the major one is we have some pretty sharp folks who didn't let grass grow under their feet, you know, when we had the opportunity to have some flexibility in that. And it's really evident in the, sorry, Mary, when we eliminated your bus, we were able to put more service on weekends and in evenings. And you can see that, you know, that really paid off. But last I checked, you were still telecommuting, so.
Pretty much. It seemed to follow the numbers.
Speaking of really sharp people, I want to introduce Tasha. Oh, there you are. Tasha Jones is our new HR manager. Andy is ecstatic because Tasha said she's going to single-handedly eliminate our operator shortages and get folks in the door. And so far in the brief time she's been here, I know she's up to the task, so I'm really looking forward to that. Also, relative to HR and training, yesterday, and I'm going to be talking to our chair about this, yesterday I got to participate We're really trying to step up our game in a lot of areas. And we actually had our first true bus operator graduation ceremony from training. And it was, I really got to give kudos to Kim Tucker, Felicia Ransom in our training department, Mornay Bota, really our entire training group, HR, operations, supervision, because it was, these folks were really moved. I mean, they gave out a valedictorian award, so the best student in the class got top spot in the seniority of that group, got a certificate. They made Ed and I give speeches. Ed talked to them about the importance of monitoring their pension plan, which was really, really fascinating, scintillating.
It was a scintillating speech.
I think Lillian wore out her camera taking pictures of the event, so I'm sure you can expect to see it on social media, but really appreciative of that, and for a first effort, I think everyone who works with me knows that, I like to use the term, I'm easy to please, but hard to satisfy. I said to Kim after, I've said, I can't come up with a single critique, for a first effort, so that's unheard of. I got to keep thinking on that. I'll just close with a few RTA items. We always try to keep you up to date on what those folks are doing. We are still sifting through STAR Future Vision studies. Again, I'll take the good news out of this being we have a whole lot of really highly qualified firms who want to work with us and help us sort out how we develop the STAR going out into the future. Last month, I reported that we had received an unsolicited proposal for a joint development at Donaldson Station. So in accordance with our procurement procedures and the unsolicited proposals piece and also the FTA regulations, that we are out for public comment on that now. So that is an opportunity. If somebody thinks they can build a better mousetrap, that's their opportunity to do so. That period closes on September 20th. And if we don't get anything, the intent would be to move forward to the RTA board with a recommendation for exclusive negotiation period. And then once again this year, tighten up on the Wego STAR. We are partnering again with the Tennessee Titans to run the Titans Express to and from all of the home games. So for all those folks, I've heard as the East Bank plan was released, 3 of my friends said, where am I going to tailgate? I said, Donaldson Station, Hermitage Station, Lebanon Station, Martha Station, you name it, and then hop on the train. But with that, unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thanks, Steve. That was a good report. Anyone have any questions for Steve? I just want to echo from my report, I don't have much to the sentiments of everybody today about how much work is being done and how we're sort of taking care of ourselves. And I just think it's just awesome that we're celebrating so many different things with our drivers, with our staff, and because that's important. Everyone has worked hard, everybody wants to work hard, and these celebrations just seem to motivate everybody. They motivate me too to want to work harder here. And so really grateful for that. And I just want to echo too Steve's comments about us having the meeting with the planning group with Lucy Kemp. I think having it separate will be good, and it sort of aligns a lot with the conversations we had at our board conversation about how we want to do our work, and that lets us focus solely on that issue. So I'm really looking forward to it because there's a lot of conversation going on everywhere in the city about it, and so it's important that we're well informed and well educated, so as we have to make good decisions and be good stewards, we can be that. And just one last thing, y'all made me so happy last month, and I want to say thank you again and again for the kindness that you showed me. I just leave the light on my little plaque. It's so cute. No, and I don't think anybody else has a lit plaque. I feel like I got the only lit plaque in the world, and it feels good because it continues to light my fire to want to do all that I can do here with MTA, and grateful for your confidence in me. And the bag has much swag, and when I sort of get me a little more swag going with me, I'm gonna carry my swag bag and be really happy about it. But just want to say thank you again and tell you it's always my honor to work with you all, my board members, fellow board members. You all are amazing. And Mary and Jessica, you just walk in here like you've been here forever, like watching Janet and I. So thank you very much. And it makes it makes transit in Nashville, the future of it is just gonna be awesome, and we have good leaders to help us. And Steve, thank you very much for all of your leadership, and you all rock, and you know you do, so let's go into the fall and do what we do. Excellence, so thank you. And that concludes my report. If anybody else has any questions for me.
No questions, but rodeo Saturday.
Oh, no.
Rodeo Saturday. If you get up early, you might see me. But, you know, I'm excited.
I know
hope
the
a lot of these
rodeo
folks
is
are
so
going.
much, the rodeo is very fun. Like I
I told Tree I was going, and I'm not telling Tree that I am not, that I'm going and that I'm not going. And
Hey-
I know he gets up
Hey,
early.
Nick, be on alert. Mary threatened to run the course.
Yeah.
Steve said I could drive a bus. Yeah,
I guess a lot of people think they can drive the buses now.
I know.
I'm not one of them.
And I am no longer new.
You are no longer new. You are no longer new. You are in the river. Well, with Mary in the river, I think that calls for an adjournment.
Well, I would like to move to adjourn.
You want to move to adjourn?
Yeah.
Somebody else want a second?
Second.
Yeah. All in favor? Well, thank y'all very much.
Aye.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.